Okay, so we're going to continue with biomedical apparatus and procedures, Module 6. I've put the narrated version on YouTube for Module 5. This is basically a continuation. We talked now a lot about respiration and breathing, and we talked about intubation. What are the different risks for patients being intubated? What are the complications? Why do we intubate people or patients? And what happens afterwards. I always say that when we intubate to extubate, what does that mean? We don't necessarily intubate the patient to be intubated for the rest of his life. We want that to come out at some stage. So during the intubation, we work on that patient in order to get the tube out again. Okay? Some cases this might not happen. If I can take an example, and this might be before your time, when we looked at one of the actors, Christopher Reeves. I don't know if you know him. Christopher Reeves was the first Superman. He played in the first Superman, and he rode a horse and he fell off the horse and he broke his neck. Okay. In those type of patients, when you have like a quadriplegic patient, they cannot breathe on their own, and they will be connected to a ventilator for the rest of their lives. So instead of being intubated, they will get a tracheostomy, and the tracheostomy will then help and assist him to breathe. So he will be able maybe to take small sips of food and maybe some fluids. They can sometimes even speak, because if you have what we call a talk or a verbal tracheostomy, they will be able to talk as well. And it's just a lot easier, because you can imagine just something simple like oral hygiene. Oral hygiene, how do you brush your teeth if there's a tube going down your mouth? You know, so if it's a prolonged time that this person is going to be intubated, we usually do a tracheostomy. Even in the ICU, so you will sometimes, when you walk and you'll start noticing these things, you will see a little of an indentation, like a little scar that sits right here. And then you will know that person had a tracheostomy. And usually in the ICU, if they see that a patient is going to be ventilated for more than 7 days, it's different from ICU to ICU, but if they're going to be ventilated for more than 7 days, they do a tracheostomy, and they put the tracheostomy. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. Like I say, it just depends on the ICU. It makes it a bit easier for the patient, as well as for the nursing staff looking after the patient. Okay, normal breathing. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but make sure that you understand the normal physiology of breathing. We inhale and we exhale, and certain things happen when we inhale and when we exhale. And this is one of the things that we usually don't think a lot of. But because it's such a natural procedure when we inhale and exhale, it is something that we need to look at very meticulously when we are ventilating a person or a patient. Because we have to try to adjust that ventilation of that person to be as safe as possible. So for instance, if I use when we are running, if a person is running, automatically his brain will tell that person, I need more oxygen, the heart will start pumping faster, he will breathe a lot faster, he will take in more breaths in order to get more oxygen in. Even, say for instance, when we yawn, if our brains are telling us something about what's happening with our breathing and with our oxygen. So when we are ventilating a patient, we have to take this into consideration. So when we look at Boyle's law, as a volume increases, the pressure decreases. As a volume decreases, the pressure increases. Okay, that's fairly simple. Here we can see when it's the exact same thing when we have a syringe with a plunger. If I press down, the volume becomes smaller, but the pressure inside the syringe is a lot more. And when I don't press it in, the volume is larger, but there is not a lot of pressure going on. And that is one of the two main concepts of mechanical ventilation, is volume and pressure. So keep that in the back of your mind. Here we can see, when we look at normal breathing, okay, there is a negative pressure inside of the thorax, positive pressure. So basically what happens is, because the pressure is higher on the atmospheric side, it goes into the patient's lung or into the person's lungs, and when my diaphragm and my intercostal muscles recoil, the air is forced out, the pressure changes again, and I exhale. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to go through this, but make sure that you understand the normal breathing. So this is our first apparatus that we're going to look at. It's the bag valve mask, or as it commonly is known in the hospital, the Ambu bag. Ambu is basically just a brand name, like Toyota or Mercedes or whatever. The generic name, vehicle, then if you want to call it that, is a bag valve mask, but a lot of the times they will refer to Ambu is so common, they will say, go and give me the Ambu bag, even though it's not, the name is not Ambu, but they're referring to the bag valve mask. So when you look at the bag valve mask, you will see you have not a reservoir, but you have a coiling and recoiling system. So there's a place where you can press and release. What's not on this picture is a reservoir. Some of them have a reservoir bag at the back. You have a valve, which means that when you compress it, that valve opens and the air gets released out of the mask. Okay? And then you have some sort of an interface. Interface meaning something that you can connect to the patient. So you can either use the mask as an interface, or you can use an ET tube as an interface. So if a patient is being intubated, we remove the mask, and then the ET tube will be connected to that. You will see an ET tube fits perfectly into that part there. So then you can still ambulate the patient. Where do we use it? It's usually used in a medical emergency. Sometimes rescue workers can help a patient breathe by the squeezable bag, which is called an Ambu bag. And the reason why it works so much better is especially in the emergency cases. Now, a lot of us think an emergency somewhere out on the road, like a paramedic type of thing. That is not the case. Remember, in a hospital, an emergency can also happen. Patient can crash, and then that patient needs to be intubated and he needs to be supported by means of the Ambu bag or a bag valve mask. So usually we don't want to have a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in the hospital. Okay? When you're doing first aid, they've taught you how to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In the hospital, avoid mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. If there is no other way, then you can maybe get yourself like a little one-way valve thing. I think they have that at the first aid as well that you can use. But in hospital, you most probably will always have an Ambu bag that you can use. And the Ambu bag prevents abdominal distension. Because you are focused on the way that the mask is situated on the patient's face, the squeezing effect, most of the air goes into the patient's lungs and not into his stomach. If you're doing it wrong, you will see that the patient's stomach becomes distended and all of the air is going into his stomach and not into his lungs, and you don't want that because the stomach cannot exchange the oxygen. You want it to go into the lungs. Vomiting. So if in a lot of emergency situations the patient will vomit. Okay, so with an Ambu bag it makes it a little bit easier. There's always a suction catheter close by. You can suction all of that secretions out, that fluid, and you can then vomit, or you can then Ambu the patient better. Aspiration. It's important that you clear the mouth. Otherwise, if you are going to press on that bag, you're going to push that fluid or food or whatever it is into the trachea. That's going to cause an obstruction which is something that you don't want. Okay. Poor ventilation, okay, meaning or referring to oxygenation and ventilation. With mouth to mouth, you cannot always give proper ventilation. So with an ambu bag, you can connect it to an oxygen source, the oxygen cylinder or the wall, and you can properly ventilate that patient. All of these above carry a poor prognosis. So if these things happen, the patient's chances of surviving that incident is becoming less and less. Okay. The function of the ambu bag is a squeezable bag with a one-way valve and a face mask. It doesn't always have a face mask because you can sometimes connect it to an ET tube. Compressing the bag opens that valve, forcing the air through the mask or the artificial airway, which is the ET tube, into the lungs. Releasing the bag closes the valve, and the exhalation occurs passively through an exhalation port. Remember, you don't want that air that comes back from the patient to go into the bag again. Otherwise, what are we causing? Rebreathing. We want the CO2 to go out and we want fresh oxygen to come in. During exhalation, the bag automatically refills with either room air or oxygen. So if it's not connected to an oxygen source, it will just fill with normal room air. The cycle continues until spontaneous breathing occurs, or if the patient is then maybe connected to some sort of a mechanical device like a ventilator. What are the indications for a bag valve mask or for an ambu bag when the ET tube intubation or a definitive control of the other airway is not possible? So usually you will start off with the ambu bag if the patient has just crashed. Okay? So then you will get your ambu bag, you will start resuscitating. Somebody will do the compressions on the chest and somebody will do the breathing for the patient. Then you will try to intubate the patient. So you will then physically try to. So if the intubation maybe fails, then you don't say, oh well, we tried. End of the, okay? You then continue with the bag until you get the patient intubated, or if there's some other means of resuscitating the patient. It's usually the first response, okay, to inadequate oxygenation and ventilation. So it's important that if you're responsible for the defib, for the emergency trolley, make sure that the ambu bag is there, that it's working, that you have one. Make sure that you have the right or the correct size ambu bag. So if you're working in a pediatric ward or baby ward or whatever, you cannot use a big adult ambu bag. It's a bailout maneuver, as I just said. So if you can't get the patient intubated and you're waiting maybe for a doctor to come, then you can still bag the patient and keep the patient alive with the ambu bag. And it is also used for pre-oxygenation. Remember, we said one of the things that we do when you intubate a patient, or when a patient is going to be intubated, we put the oxygen on 100% and we pre-oxygenate the patient. We give them that extra breath of air. Like when you swim underwater, we give them that extra breath of air in order for that intubation process to take place. Pediatrics and manual breathing. Sometimes we find it very difficult to resuscitate the children because most of you have seen that a child's head is quite large to the rest of the body, proportional. That's why it's so important that all the children should be strapped into either into the safety belt or a baby seat. Because of the head size, that's the part that if there's an accident, the momentum usually takes them through the windscreen. Okay? Because of that, it's sometimes difficult to get them into the correct position to breathe. Their facial features, we've all heard about baby fat. We will say when you have a niece or a nephew and haven't seen them for a long time and you say, oh, you've lost all your baby fat. That because their faces are quite puffy, it sometimes makes it difficult to get the mask properly over their faces. The lung size, very important, they're smaller. So you cannot use adult volumes, Remember we said one of the things that you have to keep in mind, volume and pressure. You cannot use adult volumes to get the air into the patient, and you cannot use adult pressures. So you cannot squeeze very hard, forcing the air into the patient's lungs. Their tongues are quite large. So sometimes, especially if they're lying on their back, the tongue might fall back, and that might cause an obstruction. So in those patients, it might be beneficial to put in an airway to keep the tongue out of the way. The 3 pillars of airway management, important question in the test. Okay? Patency of the upper airway, okay? Protection against aspiration, and assurance of oxygen and ventilation. What does this mean? Okay? First and foremost, we want to have a patent upper airway. Meaning that we want that airway to be open, we want the air to go into the lungs, we don't want it to go into the stomach. We want to protect the patient. If he's not going to vomit now, he might vomit later. So we have to make sure that we protect, so that can be done by either putting in a nasogastric tube that goes into the stomach to drain any of that excess food, or by putting in an ET tube that will protect his upper airway. Remember, aspiration does not always, or generally it does, to maybe something that sits there and it's obstructing the upper airway. But what is the pH of the stomach content? It's very low, it's acidic. And we don't want that acid to go into the upper respiratory tract in the stomach. We have the mucous membrane that protects the stomach against that low pH. The upper respiratory tract doesn't have that. I'm sure you all had, when you get that reflux, you feel that burning sensation. That's the acid that's actually burning your upper respiratory. And we don't want that stuff to go into. That can cause an inflammatory process, and it can then influence the patient's outcome. We want to make sure that we get in enough oxygen into the patient, and we want to make sure that we get the carbon dioxide out, because that is normal breathing. We take in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Now, if we are managing a patient's airway, we need to make sure that that is actually happening. Otherwise, what are we doing it for? Okay, so here you can see this is a typical Berghoff mask. Okay, providing a volume of 6 to 7 moles per kilogram of breath, depending on the size of the bag. For a patient with a perfusing rhythm, ventilate at a rate of about 10 to 12 breaths per minute, which we know is the normal breath rate. Okay. So adults, they have a 2-liter bag, and for the pediatrics, and I'll show you in the swim lab, we have all the different sizes there. Types of bags. Okay, now what does this refer to? Now we've talked a little bit about, we talked a lot about the ambu bag, or the bag valve mask, which is a self-inflating bag. Okay? We also get a flow inflating bag, which they usually use in anesthesia. So the flow inflation bag only fills when the oxygen from compressed source flows into it. Whereas with the ambu bag, it happens if you let that go, it has a recoil, and it fills either with room air or with the oxygen source. Where with the anesthetic bag, if there is no source, it will not inflate. Okay, so that's one of the 2 main differences. Very nice question to ask in a table format. Differentiate between a flow inflation bag and an ambu bag. It's dependent on compressed air. So if there's no compressed air, it doesn't work. You're going to sit there with a flat bag. You will not be able to resuscitate the patient. It must have a tight fitting mask. You will see that when you work in theatre, the mask looks a little bit different than the ambu bag mask. So this one is dependent on the fact that it fits tight around the patient's mouth. It's also used what we call a flow control valve, or an APL valve, to regulate the pressure inflation. So on the anesthetic machine, there is a little knob, an APL knob, which they can turn to increase the pressure to get the air into the patient. Okay, so here we can see the difference. This is a flow inflation bag. So it looks, when you look at it, it's almost like a rubber type of material, like a balloon. So if you don't blow into that balloon, it will not fill up. Whereas the self-inflating is made of a plastic silicone type of material with the recoil capabilities. If you press it, it will recoil and it will be able to fill the patient. So here you can see there's a valve, so you can actually regulate the amount of pressure. Whereas with this one, there's also a pressure valve. It's called a PEEP valve that you can change, and I'll show that to you in the simulation there. Okay. Make sure that you know the advantages and disadvantages of the flow inflating bag. Okay. What is the advantages? Can deliver PEEP and CPAP. Okay. Disadvantages. This is something that you will not really use as a technologist unless you become a critical care technologist. They work in theatre. They will use a flow inflation bag. Whereas most of you will be using an ambu bag. Make sure that you know what the advantages is, okay, and what the disadvantages are. Okay, the procedure. Very important. You are going to do this in the simulation lab. Okay, so you are going to, and we call it the CE method. So first you have to get the patient in the correct position, sniffing position, as with the incubation. Get the patient to get that upper airway open. And then we have what we call the CE. When you look at my hand, it's the CE, it forms a C and an E. Okay? And I'll show you, you can see there, the C part is to have control over the mask, and the E part is to keep the patient's neck and mandible in position in that sniffing position. Okay, so you'll see how to do it with the one hand, maintain the seal with the thumb and the index finger, okay, thumb and index finger, with the middle finger under the mandible, keeps it in the right position with the ring and middle finger under the angle of the mandible. This maintains the patency. And with the other hand, you ventilate. So, one hand you keep the patient, and with this hand you're going to do the ambu. There's the sniffing position. Sometimes you will need to remove the pillow from the patient's head in order to get them in that correct position. But, very important, if the patient has a neck brace on, that means that there's something wrong with the neck. Then you cannot just remove cushions or start flexing the patients. Then you have to do with what you have. So you have to make sure that the patient doesn't have some sort of a neck injury. How do you know if you are actually ambuing the patient correctly? How do you know? So first you look at the rise of the chest and the fall of the chest. So you will see, when you are compressing the bag, the patient's chest will rise. When you let the bag go, the patient's chest will fall. Look for good bilateral air entry. Okay? That means that it goes into both the lungs. You can even ask somebody to listen to the stethoscope, especially if the patient is maybe intubated. See if the patient's color is improving. Remember, patients that are oxygen depleted will tend to get blue. So when you look at them, see if their color is improving. Make sure that there's no air going into the stomach. When you see the stomach starting rising, you know you're not having a patent airway. Feeling the bag. Now what does that mean? When you actually compress the bag, you will tend to get an experience and a feel whether the air is actually going in the right place or not. Whether it's compressing very hard. So for instance, if the patient's mouth is closed and you put the mask on the patient's mouth, you're going to feel that you're not going to get air and it will blow out of the side. When it goes in too easy, then it means there might be some sort of a leak. So when you compress it and it's like easy, then you know something is not. So you have to get a feel for the bag to know, okay, and you will immediately know, okay, this is how it's supposed to feel. And then you're in a hospital. So there should be some sort of an oxygen saturation monitor that you can use. Connect that to the patient. That's your first line of defense in any emergency, because it gives you a pulse rate and it gives you oxygen saturation. So you'll immediately be able to see what the patient's pulse is, you'll see what the patient's saturation is. Contraindications. When do we not use the ambu bag? Okay? If there's a complete upper airway obstruction, after paralysis and induction, we might have an increased risk of aspiration. Now, usually that's why we will use a flow bag, flow inflated, because this is associated with anesthesia. Usually we paralyze the patient when we induce anesthesia. Okay. If the patient maybe has severe facial trauma or eye injuries, you will be careful to maybe use an ambu bag. Or if there's any foreign material, you have to get that out. Otherwise, you're going to push that down in the patient's upper airway. Just want to see what time the next. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. Okay. Just want to see. I think let's stop here. I don't want to go too. Okay, no, there is still. Let's see if I can get through this before the 10 minutes. Okay. So we've done the contraindications. Predictors of a difficult airway. Okay, how do you know if the patient may be going to have a difficult airway? If there's an air obstruction in the edentulous patients with false teeth. Okay. If the patient has a beard, that might cause a problem. If the patient is overweight, obese, obviously patients older than 70 years, or if the patient has some sort of a facial wound or burns or something like that. Difficult airway, very important. How do we handle it? By doing or using the triple airway maneuver. Okay? We do the head tilt. We're going to show that to you in the simulation. We're going to do the chin lift. We're going to show that in the simulation as well. And we're going to do a jaw thrust. And then you can either put a oropharyngeal or nasopharyngeal airway, either through the nose or the mouth. It's just a little piece of airway. You can use a two-handed technique to press down on the mask. You can try lifting the head off the pillow to get a better sniffing position, and you can try to generate as much positive pressure as possible without the air going into the stomach. That's how you manage a difficult airway. Nice question to ask. Triple airway maneuver, you'll do this in the sim lab. There you can see the jaw thrust. Okay, there's the head tilt chin lift maneuver. Okay, we'll physically do that, so I'm not going to go through that now. There you can see that's the oropharyngeal or the nasopharyngeal airway. This is the oral one, so you can put that, it keeps the tongue in place, and now you have a good airway. You can basically ambu through that. If it's the nasopharyngeal one, it just goes through the nose, off the nose. Two-handed technique. So there you can see they're using two hands to do the CE, or you can press down. This is not usually advisable to do that because that can sometimes can damage the patient. Okay, you don't have to press down with all your weight to get the air in. If the bag valve mask still fails, then you have to intubate the patient. If you can't intubate, you can either use a laryngeal mask, or you then do a cricothyroidotomy. If you watch the movie Anaconda, okay, in that movie where there's a patient or person gets stung by a wasp inside the throat, and then they use that big pen to do the cricothyroidotomy on the patient to help him breathe. So there you can see that is a laryngeal mask. It almost looks like an ET tube, so that's something that you can use. So it's much easier to use than an ET because you just slide it in. You can see there, it just goes in and it gives you an open airway. And here they are doing the cricothyroidotomy, where they open up and then they place a tube. In the movie they actually use a big pen or something like that. And then you can. So now you've now taken the upper respiratory obstruction out of the equation because you've now entered the airway below the obstruction. Complications, okay? Sometimes we will either hypo or hyperventilation. Okay, usually it is hyper. People are so stressed they will bag like this. And then you blow off the patient's CO2 and you don't get proper. So you have to sort of teach yourself when you are bagging, look at your own breathing and breathe with the patient. Don't start doing this because it's not adequate. Make sure that you don't see air going in, okay, that might sometimes happen. Overstretching, okay, if you use the incorrect size bag for pediatric patient maybe. Lung injury from overpressurization, if you use too much pressure, remember the two things, volume and pressure, and aspiration. And that's it. So we'll stop at mechanical ventilation and we'll continue with that when I see you. Okay, for tomorrow, what we are going to do for tomorrow, and we'll let you know on the group. Tomorrow we're going to do the practicals. Okay, the ones that we now missed on Friday. So on the group, because I think I see you for 4 periods. Okay, so I will then let you know which group comes for the first, the second, the third, and the fourth. And we're going to do the practicals. Remember that was the hand washing, the hand sanitizing, as well as the donning and doffing of the mask. And this will be a marked assessment. So make sure that you know how to do that. We're going to do that in the sim lab, so remember your lab codes. Okay. Thank you, everybody.